and welcome to another and perhaps our final discussion in social psychology. I hope you've had the opportunity to see the other sessions in this course. And we are going to look at one factor that is not very pleasant, but important for you to note so you know how to manage it. What am I talking about? In this session, we are looking at loneliness. What is loneliness? We have established in the previous sessions that human beings want to seek out others. It's a basic human need. But you and I know that sometimes our attempt to be with others is not successful. We may find some people attractive, but they may not find us attractive, or the vice versa. So in this session, what are we seeking to do? What happens when our efforts are getting to relate with others are not successful? What happens when we are rejected? It results in loneliness. So simply we are asking, what is loneliness? In this session, the expectation is that at the end of it, you can explain social anxiety and loneliness, and you can give sociological and psychological explanations for loneliness, and you can be able to identify and explain some of the strategies you can use to mitigate loneliness or its effects. So we are going to seek to define the concepts of social anxiety, loneliness, consider the explanations for the phenomenon, and how to avoid loneliness. It will be useful to read chapter 7 of the required text and the article on the subject posted on Sakai. So to start with, what is social anxiety and loneliness? Social anxiety has been defined severally, but we can simply say it is an unpleasant emotion that you feel when you are concerned about interpersonal evaluation. You recall that I said that in our attempt to approach others, we are being evaluated along a positive or negative dimension. So when an individual is thinking of how he or she is being evaluated and is concerned about the negative evaluation he or she may be getting, it results in what is called social anxiety. And when people are socially anxious, it results in two things. Either they would avoid social interaction because they don't know how others are going to receive them. They are anxious about the interactions with others. And so such persons would withdraw from others, which often will result in loneliness. Or even when they try to interact with others, socially anxious persons tend to engage in unpleasant social exchanges. Because they expect negative responses, they often act in ways that would rather reinforce those negativities. So you would notice that socially anxious persons would avoid eye contact, they are nervous and jittery, and they may say things that may be inappropriate within a context, which subsequently leads to people having a negative impression of them. So it's a case of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I know I am not liked, and they act in ways that do not make them liked. So I haven't understood what social anxiety is. What is loneliness? We know that social anxiety is what leads to loneliness. So basically we say that loneliness is an unpleasant experience which occurs when a person's network of social relationships is deficient, either quantitatively or qualitatively. You recall the homeostatic principle? If you don't, take a moment and go back to it. So we are saying that according to the homeostatic principle, we are all seeking an optimal range of interaction. What it then means is that if I have a range of optimum range, and I am not meeting it, I am deficient in it, either qualitatively or quantitatively, I would experience loneliness. So when your network of social relationships are deficient, in one way, the person can experience loneliness. It's important to note that loneliness is a subjective experience. It's only the person that is lonely that knows that he or she is lonely. And loneliness is different from solitude. You can be alone without being lonely, and you can be in the midst of a crowd and be lonely. It's about how you assess the optimal range of your interaction with other persons. Loneliness can either be chronic or short-lived. All of us experience loneliness at some point in our life. It is a normal human tendency when it is short-lived, but it becomes a problem when it is chronic, and it's the chronic kind of loneliness that we want to dwell on in this session. Having understood loneliness, it's important to understand why people may feel lonely. The psychological explanations of loneliness may include these, and of course, this is not an exhaustive list. You may come across several explanations in your readings. Trauma or bereavement can result in loneliness. Imagine a person who's lost their spouse, a husband or a wife, who they've shared all their life with, especially when this death is sudden. Say your spouse is killed by robbers, or somebody who tragically, traumatically loses a child, sudden. When these happen, it can result in extreme loneliness for people. And if not managed properly, these can become long-term, chronic, which can affect the person's interactions with others and their general well-being. Then we say that loneliness can also be engendered by relational transitions. And this particularly relates to young persons who are getting into love relationships and falling out of relationships. Adolescents and young adults who get married and perhaps divorce. While there are transitions in relationships from one relationship to another, the breakups can result in pain and loneliness for some persons. Then again, we can talk about the childhood home environment. Persons that have grown up in homes that are less expressive, less warm, where parents are not expressive towards their children, do not show their children that they love them and affirm and validate them. Such persons may grow up having a low self-esteem, feeling unloved, and not feeling connected to others in a social situation. So your home background is very critical, whether you are going to have a tendency for loneliness or you are going to be an outgoing person. Then we talk about the internal crisis, a sense of failure. And this is particularly the case for men, much more than for women. That is not to say women do not experience it, but it's much more intense for men, especially in our cultural context where men need to prove themselves by the work they do. A man's worth tends to be tied to the work he does. So when a man starts feeling like he's not been able to achieve the expectations of society, get a job, marry a wife, have children, build a house, buy a car, provide money, and do the things that society thinks that men should do, that man starts feeling a sense of failure and would want to withdraw from people lest he's ridiculed or talked about. So that internal state of I have failed can result in loneliness for some men. Then finally, we talk about the existential loneliness, and this is what I talk about, the fact that this is basic. All of us experience short, brief moments of loneliness. For instance, if you went to a funeral and you saw how some prominent person had died, for instance, and was being buried, you may experience short bouts of loneliness where you say, oh, so is this what life is all about? And just feel it's not worth all of the trouble. That sense is what we talk and say, refer to as the existential loneliness. Then what are the sociological explanations of loneliness? There are a few of them. We say changes in the family patterns can result in loneliness. In our contemporary society, there is an increasing nucleation of the family. In times past, where people lived in when people lived in a communal way, extended family relations, even when your parents were not available, you had extended family, aunties, grandparents, even neighbors to take care of you. But with urbanization, we see that there is an increasing nucleation of the family. You find families that is just father, mother, a child, or two children, or few number of children. So there isn't a lot of people to interact with, and these can result in loneliness. Then we talk about the large organizations, cities, communities within which people live. I know that many of us who live in the cities may not even know who our next door neighbor is. You may find yourself in a university community, a big community, so many people, and you do not know who your next door neighbors in your flat or your hostel are. Because there are so many people to deal with. You work in an organization that is so big, and you feel so lost in it. So the sizes of buildings, the sizes of organizations, the sizes of communities and cities people live in has resulted in anonymity and individualism that does not allow for people to connect with others in the social setting, and this can result in loneliness. Then we talk about frequent relocation. Today you live in Accra, tomorrow you're living in Kumasi, the next day you are in Kenya, the next time you are in Nigeria. When you move frequently, it does not allow you the opportunity to connect with people, get to know people, and bond with them. For instance, your parent may be a pastor or a priest, and who is transferred from one place to another. So before you even get to make friends and know people, your parent is on transfer again. Or for instance, your parent is a policeman or a health professional. Constant transfers can undermine your connection with people within your locality. Then again, as sociologists, we talk about the pervasive spirit of competition and individualism. We live in a generation where everybody is seeking to make something out of his or her life. And as we compete to excel, we are stepping on people along the way. We have become relatively self-focused, not thinking about others' emotions, others' feelings, others' well-being. It's just about us in a competitive approach, and in the process, we disrupt social relationships, which may leave us alone after we have reached the top. So these are some of the sociological explanations as to why people may find themselves lonely in one situation or the other. What are some of the consequences of loneliness? We say that lonely persons tend to be less friendly. Why? Because they are anticipating negative responses from others anyway. So they themselves are already not friendly towards others. They are less warm. They tend to be evasive because they are afraid that when they answer questions forthrightly and you get to know them, you may not like them, so they tend to avoid questions. They are less honest and they are easily angered. It's also said that lonely persons tend to have a negative impression of themselves, low self-esteem, which may be as a result of the family background or some negative responses they got in their interactions with others. It's also important to note that lonely people do not tend to make good first impressions. And in our discussion on perceptions, you realize how important it is to make good impressions, because that may open a door for you to get a job, to get a spouse, to get one opportunity or the other. It is about creating positive impressions. And if you are lonely, you do not have that skill to engender those impressions that may open up good opportunities for you. Then we say that lonely persons also tend to be suspicious people. Just as they think others are thinking badly of them, they are also thinking badly of others. They have an inferiority complex. And so they're always thinking negative things about others. What some lonely persons then do is to bury themselves in their occupations. So they perhaps will find themselves behind their computer or in one work or the other. They would rather relate with inanimate objects than relate with a fellow human being. Because after all, these inanimate objects are not judging them as a fellow human being may be doing. So they bury themselves in their occupations. Such persons can also engage in daydreaming or wishful thinking. They sit and they look in the air rather than want to relate with another. Some may also engage in self-destructive activities, drugs, alcohol, indiscriminate sex. In other words, trying to find love in the wrong places just to feel connected. Some may become television addicts, just listening or watching what goes on television. And oftentimes what is depicted may be negative, which goes to reinforce their beliefs and their loneliness. So these are just a few of the consequences of loneliness. I wonder if you find yourself exhibiting any of these tendencies. Then you should examine yourself and determine whether you are lonely or not. And if you find that you have some tendencies for loneliness, then you may ask yourself, how do I prevent it? Or how do I manage the loneliness I'm experiencing? It's said that we can manage loneliness by doing these three core things. Admit that you have a problem, because that's the first point. Once you admit you have the problem, then you can take steps to manage it. It's important to obtain training in social skills, and it's important to make oneself attractive. How do you obtain training in social skills? There are several things. Social skills training is a psychological training or a behavioral training program which you can undergo for about a week or two, but basically social skills training is a lifelong training where you learn how to talk to people, relate to people, behave with people, so you are not found alone and lonely at any point in time. One of the things to do to exhibit that or portray that you're a socially skilled person is to learn how to speak fluently and politely on the telephone. I'm sure you're wondering what I'm talking about, because this is so basic, but it's very important to draw people towards you or to repel people off you. It's important to regulate your mood before an interaction. So for instance, I'm coming into a lecture room and I'm feeling conscious about how my students are going to respond. I need to regulate my mood and put myself in a relaxed manner before I stand before my students to talk. So in any situation, whether you are on a date or going for an interview, it's important to regulate your mood so you do not engage in any social blunders as you relate to that with others. It's important to initiate conversation when you find yourself in any situation with others. And it's important to be an active listener, not just a listener, but an active one. How do you communicate active listening? By maintaining eye contact to let the other person know that what you are saying is important and I am paying attention to it. It's important to communicate respect, and it's important to exercise self-disclosure. So somebody tells you something about themselves, it's important to also tell them something about yourself. But there are limits as to how much information you can divulge at every point in time. Important to learn how to give and receive compliments. And important to manipulate certain non-verbal cues so as to avoid interpersonal conflict. Because nobody really wants to be around people who are quarrelsome. So you don't want relationships where your presence is always creating conflict. And it's important to know what to say, how to say what you say. Then we say that social skills training also is important. It means you must be able to work within the social norms. Your actions, your attitudes, and your behavior must be within certain social norms. What do I mean here? For instance, if you are at a table with people eating a meal or you've been invited to dinner, you must conform to the social norms. Otherwise, then you are portraying yourself as a socially unskilled person. Imagine you being invited to lunch in my house. And whilst I serve, say, grilled tilapia, you start a conversation and say, oh, madam, the last time I ate grilled tilapia, I think it wasn't properly done. And so I had diarrhea, and I went to the toilet so many times. And this is how my fecal matter looked like. It was this way. And is that what you should be talking about at a dinner table? That is not conforming. You are becoming a social deviant, not conforming to the norms and the etiquette that are allowed at table. This is just a simple example, but some people just don't know what to say what. And this can result in disturbances in social relationships. We say that to be socially skilled, you must not be a narcissist. What do I mean by conversational narcissism? These are people who are habitually turning conversations to themselves. So you meet them and perhaps start, oh, Kofi, you know, when I went to lectures today, it was this. Before you could even share your experience, they hijack the conversation and they rather tell you about what it is that they had experienced in lectures. Such persons are called conversational narcissists, and socially skilled persons must avoid being this way. If you read the required text, Barron and Branscombe had identified 4 basic steps that you can use to make yourself attractive, because we had indicated that one of the ways to beat down loneliness is to make yourself attractive so others want to approach you. And the thing to do is to make proximity work for you. In other words, when you find yourself in any social setting, try to reach out to others So for instance, you find yourself at a cocktail party. You don't go and stand in a corner and have a pity party. You try to relate to others. Speak to the people you find yourself with in a proximate location so that you build an acquaintance and these people may then lead you onto other opportunities. We say you must create positive effects. Simply smile. Compliment others. You don't pay anything by smiling. In fact, when you smile, you make yourself likable and attractive. You get compliments instead of criticisms. And try not to bore people with your worries. Create positive effects so that when people see you coming, they are not running, oh, there he comes, there she comes. They are rather, oh, there he comes, this guy is just so funny. They rather want to be in your company instead of trying to avoid your company. Then we say that you must make the most of your appearance. Because sometimes people argue that how I look does not matter. It is what I have to offer that matters. But how you look is critical for the person to even want to pay attention to what you have to offer. So in relation to these, the factors are relative. Make yourself look good. So you are talking about how you carry yourself, your weight, your hair, your clothes, your makeup, and all of those. Decency in the context, every context that you find yourself, right? So imagine you going to your professor's office, wearing a dress that is showing all of your cleavage, and that is so short you cannot even sit. What do you expect? Are you expecting a warm reception, or are you expecting the professor to ask you out of their office? Some of us do that. And so the person is not sure whether to look in your face or to look at your cleavage. All of these things matter. How you appear. If you come to a job interview appearing this way, you may not get the job, another would get it, and you say somebody has bribed their way through, but it's just how you presented yourself that may have done you in. Then we also talk about emphasizing similarities and minimizing differences. Try not to be abrasive in your relationship with others. I have my opinion and that is it. This is what I think and this is it. I don't care what you think. Those things, try to build bridges as you relate with others, and that can make you attractive and take you out of the situation where you are all by yourself without any friends or company. So having said all of these, let's attempt this question on social skills training. I'm arguing that social skills training is critical for improving interpersonal relationships and reducing loneliness. Do you agree with this statement? You think it's justifiable to say this? Well, explain your position with some facts based on what we have said so far. So what have we sought to do in this session? We have established that, yes, though we all seek to reach out to others, sometimes we are not successful, and this can result in loneliness. Loneliness can be temporary, but sometimes it is long-term, chronic. If it is chronic, why does it happen? We looked at the sociological and psychological explanations and tried to establish why loneliness happens. We have established in this session that the way to control or avoid getting lonely is to make the most of your relationship with others, and most importantly, get training in social skills. And I've emphasized that social skills training is not an event, it is a lifelong process. So as you go along in life, you pick up the do's and don'ts to know how to make your relationships with others pleasant, productive, and fruitful. Thank you.